It's Friday, geeks, and you are watching another edition of the Friday Night Geek Show. I am Dante D, and welcome to the channel where we talk about comic books and other geek stuff. Joining me tonight from his local comic book store, where he also works, is Wesley Stewart. Wesley, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Why don't you show us a little bit of the store there. You got some cool things behind you there.
Yeah. The store I work at is called Level Up Entertainment. As you can see, it's a comic book store, but we also do retro games from anything from Atari on up, statues, Gundam models, video games. You name it. We do it all.
Awesome, wonderful, and this is a shop in Jersey, correct?
Yes, it's in Mays Landing, New Jersey, which is where I live. It's just outside of Atlantic City. We're like the Atlantic City area, the Jersey Shore area.
Wonderful. So if any of the viewers tonight are ever in the area, you will have to check it out. It looks like a really nice shop there for not only comic books, retro comics, but also retro games. Any? Do you guys do trading cards as well?
No trading cards.
Just games and comics.
But we do have pinball machines.
We do have pinball machines. All right, yeah, pinball machines. Those are. I actually miss pinball machines. I feel like there aren't enough places nowadays that carry pinball machines. So we'll have to check that out. I'll have to check it out if I'm ever in the area. So tonight we're going to be talking about which comic book company is best. So basically, the way we are going to do this is we're going to go through each era of comic books, and we are going to decide which comic book company was best in each era. We're going to write it down, and then at the end, we're going to tally it up and decide which company takes the cake or takes the trophy for the best company. But before we jump right into this, I just wanted to give a shout out to some of our viewers that are just rolling in here. We got Lowell Lucas Jr. Welcome, and Christopher Johnson. Welcome. We took a little bit of a break last week, but we are back. I hope everyone had a great Labor Day. How did you spend your Labor Day, Wes?
Working.
Working
in the comic shop.
Working in the comic shop on Labor Day. So no rest for the wicked then, right? Exactly. And we have also Keith Gull, who just rolled in as well. Welcome, Keith. So let's start off with which company's best. Okay, so we're going to start back in the 1940s, because essentially the comic book medium was born in the 1930s. Comic books as we know them today, anyway. So 1940s, Wes. Which company do you think was best in the 1940s?
In the 1940s, I would have to go with DC.
Have to go with DC. And you know what? I totally 100% agree with you. And DC was a company that essentially ruled the market in the 1940s, and that was partially due to the line of superheroes that they had. Even though, in the 1940s, you saw kind of like this reduction in superhero comics after the war. Characters like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, they stayed popular during the 1940s, and their sales were just so high in the 1940s. So I definitely agree with you. It definitely takes the cake. Now, can you think of any highlights from the 1940s? Any favorite moments from the Golden Age?
Actually, yes. I actually own some of the stuff from that era. Growing up, I had a fascination for the Golden Age heroes.
Wonderful.
So we're looking at, there we go. The Green Lantern 25 from the 1940s, from 1944.
Beautiful.
That was great. And then We also have Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel was like super huge in the 1940s and 50s,
Absolutely.
which gave DC a run for their money. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, Captain Marvel was a character that was very similar to Superman in some ways, and definitely was a big contender in the superhero scene. Just wanted to say hello to some other people that are joining us. Eric Breen. Eric, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us tonight. And Southern Comic Geek, thank you for joining us. Yeah, so we had Captain Marvel, we had your Green Lantern book there, and I have to say I am quite envious because you have some Golden Age books. I actually don't have any Golden Age books in my collection just because they're so darned expensive, right? So
they can be, as long as you don't matter about the condition and just want to own it. They're not too far out of reach.
So for some of our viewers this evening that are like me, don't have any Golden Age comics in their collections, what's some advice that you can give for getting some Golden Age comics? I mean, definitely, yeah, don't worry about the condition, but should people be staying away from like key issues?
The key issues are super expensive. Those are the ones that are non-obtainable. The Batmans, the Supermans. As long as you kind of stick to the lower tier characters, you should be able to find some Golden Age comics at an affordable price. Like, for example, yeah, Green Lantern is a popular character, but I only spent about $250 for that one.
Okay.
Whereas you can find some Golden Age books under $100. Condition again matters, but you can definitely find some for under $100.
Okay. All right. So that's actually pretty good. When you think about the Golden Age, because when you think about that, you're thinking like books that are thousands upon thousands, and those for sure are some of those key issues. Now, you said some of the lower tier characters. What are some of the characters that you would consider lower tier besides maybe Green Lantern?
You have like Bullet Man and Bullet Girl, Doll Man. Like a lot of these really obscure characters, or if you go with something like this is another comic from the 40s. It was Wow Comics, which featured Mary Marvel, and it had a bunch of lower tier like Mr. Scarlet, the Magician. So those were characters that weren't as well known as Batman, Superman. Those are the books that you can find today at an affordable price.
Right. Well, that's good. We'll definitely have to keep a lookout. I'll have to keep a lookout for some of those. And Christopher Johnson saying that the feed is glitching out every few seconds. I really hope that's stopped for you, Christopher. Everything seems to be working okay here. So other viewers that are watching this evening, please let us know if you're experiencing any glitches. Yeah, because we have some people here. Tim Robinson saying he's loving the chat, so I'm hoping that everyone else is loving the chat too. Glitches aren't good. Glitches aren't good for chats, right? Yeah, so definitely. Okay, so we have like Doll Man is a character I haven't even heard of. I've heard of Bullet Man actually, and these are characters that for the most part are not in print today. Correct?
Correct. Some of them resurfaced, which we will kind of touch on later. I'll show you something where some of these characters kind of pop back up.
Okay, so some of them do pop back up. Okay, that's good to hear. Because obviously we know later on that there are some characters like Green Lantern. Also, who else here? Like the Flash. They definitely pop back later on too. So that's good to know, right? So some people here are still experiencing some glitches. You know what, Wes? Why don't I'm gonna check something out here. I believe that there might be something with the internet, perhaps. I'm going to plug in an Ethernet cable, actually. And why don't you maybe show some of our viewers this evening some of your books that you have, and I'll pop back in like literally 2 seconds, okay?
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm gonna
Sure.
give you the spotlight here. All right, just give me a second.
Some more things from the golden age. You have like Plastic Man. Again, Plastic Man books are pretty attainable. They're not super expensive. Again, condition plays a lot into it. This one was uh, purchased at a 6.0, and it cost me just over $100. Uh, so again, the trick with the Golden Age books, um, as long as you are not looking to invest and just would rather collect, you can find a lot that you can get. Also, we talked about Captain Marvel. You know, Captain Marvel got so popular that in the whole family got a book. So you had Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel, and this ran for several issues until DC stepped in.
I'm back. Hopefully that solves the problem. So, so you were showing a Captain Marvel book, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we're with these Golden Age books here. Can you think of some other highlights? So if people were looking to dish out a little bit more money for a Golden Age book, what would you recommend?
You can always go with Action Comics, Superman, Batman, Detective, Sensation Comics, which featured Wonder Woman, All Flash Comics, which was the Golden Age Flash. I've been kind of eyeing one myself lately. I'm just looking to see if the price is going to drop. It's a little bit out of the range I'm looking to spend right now, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Now with some of these Golden Age books like Action Comics, Detective Comics, could you expect to pay quite a bit of money even if it's not like a key issue? Say it's just like a random, Detective Comics, like I don't know, like 44 or something, where something really significant doesn't happen. Would those still be quite expensive as well?
They will probably be up there because remember, at that point, the government deemed comic books bad for youth, and we're encouraging the parents to burn their comics, the kids' comics. So Golden Age books have become more rare, and that also drives the price up, and that makes them a little bit unattainable just
Right.
for that reason alone.
For sure. And Lowell Lucas Jr. here is he's saying Captain Marvel had a fantastic family and an incredible legacy.
I agree.
And he's also asking, what would be a Golden Age horror comic? Actually, that's a great question because from what I understand, obviously neither of us were around in the Golden Age, but from what I understand, the crime genre and the horror genre kind of went hand in hand during that era. It wasn't really until the 1950s that you're seeing horror comics as we know them today. Because I mean, when we're thinking horror comics, we're thinking like the EC line, Tales from the Crypt, Haunt of Fear, Vault of Horror.
Yeah.
But back then you have these books that you kind of have crime and horror that are kind of going together, just like how science fiction and fantasy sometimes overlap a little bit. Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong here.
No, you're correct.
Yep. So a Golden Age horror book that I'm thinking of, or sorry, Golden Age crime book that I'm thinking of in particular is a series that was called Crime Does Not Pay. Have you ever heard of that?
I haven't heard of that one. Yeah, the horror crime books weren't my thing. I was always about the superheroes.
You're always about the superheroes. Okay, yeah. I'm the same way here. I love the superheroes, but I also have kind of like a horror comic fetish as well. Perry Comics, good evening. Welcome to the stream. Also, let me know. I plugged in the Ethernet cable, so let me know if people are still experiencing some glitches. So please let me know in the comments. Now, let's talk a little bit more about some other highlights. Do you have like any favorite stories or any favorite moments from the 1940s or the Golden Age?
1940s highlights. Wow, that's a tough one. There was like so many. That's the introduction of Plastic Man, which I showed while you stepped away. Actually, that was from like the 1950s. But you had Plastic Man, and then you had again the introduction of just superheroes in general. So that whole period to me was like just super important to the industry as a whole.
Yeah. I know my highlight, I think, for the Golden Age, because as we know, for those of you that have been watching the channel for a while, you'll know that I'm huge into stories. I probably love stories a little bit more than I love actually collecting issues. I think my highlight from the Golden Age definitely would be Batman #1 from 1940. And the reason why is because I find that most stories from the Golden Age are kind of difficult to read, and I don't mean difficult to read as in they're like very riddled with purple prose or anything like that. It's just they're so simple and not always the most entertaining, so it can kind of get boring real fast. But I find Batman #1, that first story that introduces the Joker, where he's murdering all of those people, the rich men that own the diamonds, and he's broadcasting on the radio. I actually found that very entertaining for a Golden Age story, so I thought that was great. Do you have any other favorite stories?
Oh, you're glitching.
I'm glitching. I wonder what's going on here tonight.
You have to restart it with Ethernet.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now. Okay, perfect. I wonder what is going on here. Okay. Okay. So did you have any other stories that you really enjoyed from the Golden Age?
You know what? Yes, there's I didn't bring it, but there's a Fun Comics which had Green Arrow and Speedy. See, I liked the Seven Soldiers of Victory, which recently showed up in Stargirl in the TV series, which I was like super geeked out about.
Okay.
So so you had Green Arrow and Speedy way back then, and they're characters that are still around today, which I think is really cool.
Yes, absolutely. And Eric Breen here is saying, Crime Does Not Pay was published by Charles Bureau, as memory serves. Okay, I actually didn't know that. So thank you, Eric, for that little tidbit there. And Keith is saying, wasn't Golden Age more Westerns? Western definitely was quite the genre in the Golden Age as well. Were you much into Westerns at all, Wesley?
The Lone Ranger. I got a couple Lone Ranger Golden Age books. Again, because he was as close to a superhero, even though it was a Western that I liked. So yeah, there was that. There was a bunch of like I can't think off the top of my head. I know because there's a vendor that I do buy from that has a nice catalog of Golden Age books for sale. And when I'm scrolling through them, there's a lot of Westerns.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
And then we also had the Disney books and the Terry Toons with Mighty Mouse and Tom and Jerry. And those were huge in the Golden Age as well, too.
Yep, absolutely. The funny animals, right? So those are definitely, those were huge. So it wasn't, for those of you watching that are superhero fans, the Golden Age definitely was not just superheroes. A lot of different genres, right? Just like fiction, you go to the library, see many different genres of fiction. It's the same way with comic books, right? And then Lowell Lucas Jr. is asking, any thoughts on the Submariner and the Human Torch during the Golden Age?
Oh man, yes. those are my favorite. And that's why I in the 70s, when we get to that to discuss the Invaders, because it had, a lot of those old Golden Age heroes brought back. So you had the original Human Torch, you had Submariner, and yeah, definitely one of my favorites.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I have the first few issues of the Invaders. Yeah, that's, the Submariner and the Human Torch were characters that really, I think, became popular more in the Silver Age when they had this revival and they were kind of revised for a new age. But, we definitely can't underscore their early appearances in the Golden Age, because they definitely had some great stuff back then as well, for sure.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So let's move now to the 1950s. Who's your company in the 1950s?
Between the big two, huh?
You're gonna go between the big. No, it doesn't have to be the big two. It could be a different company.
Because I would go with Fawcett, believe it or not, and that
Okay.
was the company that published, the Captain Marvel series, and I think they got too big and too popular that it scared DC, which caused Captain Marvel to go into hibernation.
Absolutely, yeah. DC became so threatened by Fawcett at one point. There was a huge legal battle that DC and Fawcett were fighting for quite a few years over. Basically, what happened was DC felt that Captain Marvel was a little bit too similar to Superman, so they basically got in this huge legal copyright battle. And it ended basically with DC getting the rights to Captain Marvel, for sure. Now,
but if we have to pick between the two, I would still say DC won the 50s, because you still had Batman, you still had Superman, and you still had Wonder Woman, which really was all they needed, because they were just selling like crazy.
For sure. Now, I also do not want to undermine EC Comics during this era, because, and the reason why, I think in terms of sales, DC definitely ruled the era, because Superman was just such a heavy hitter during this time. Anytime before 1960s, Superman is like, pretty much number one in terms of sales figures. But in terms, I think, for me anyway, in terms of story, quality, art, I definitely would have to pick EC Comics with their line of horror books, their morality tales and the shock suspense stories. Even their Two-Fisted Tales, their war stories, and their sci-fi. Lowell Lucas Jr. here was saying a little earlier that sci-fi was also a huge genre. I think sci-fi really kicked off in the 1950s because you got to think, you have post-war America. They're now in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. All this secret experimenting is going on both in the Soviet Union and the United States, at Area 51, things like that. And all these rumors are going around because they're doing all these experiments in the sky with the U-2 and things like that. Yeah. And, so that led to like a proliferation of all this UFO content. So I thought that was really cool as well. So do you have any favorite stories or any highlighted moments from the 1950s?
Not in particular. Like in the 40s and 50s, all kind of like blend as far as the Golden Age itself. So I don't actually at the moment have like a standout moment for me.
Okay. And for me, I definitely, the standout moment, I actually have two, because for me, it probably would be because Tales from the Crypt actually was not originally published as Tales from the Crypt. It was published as The Crypt of Terror, I think, for about 18 issues or so. And then I think with issue 18 or 19, Eric, I know you know this, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 18 or 19. They changed the title to Tales from the Crypt. And it just became such a significant book in that era, caused so much controversy, right? So I definitely think Tales from the Crypt, when it switched over that title, that was a huge moment. And then also we can't forget about Showcase number 4, which came out in 1958, right? That was towards the end of the 50s,
towards the end,
yeah, and that's such a huge
that was an
book,
important
right?
moment. That was an important moment.
Definitely. So why don't you tell everybody why it was such an important moment?
That was the Flash.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't that the reintroduction of the Flash?
That was the reintroduction of the Flash, and many comic book historians would consider that the birth of the Silver Age, the end of the Golden Age and the beginning
of the Silver Age,
right? Which because in the Silver Age you have the revival of superheroes and the return, superheroes came back with a vengeance, right? So for sure.
That actually kicked it off right there, because then you had Green Lantern follow, and that was it. That was an important book.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Green Lantern was in Showcase number. Was he in 5? It was. I know it's that. It's that cover. And I know it was that cover where he's like on the front. He has this new costume, and there's that green missile or something like that. Was that number 5?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I think it was that one. Right. So,
you know what? Hopefully one of our viewers can look it up real quick for us.
Oh yes, someone knows that off the top of their head right now. I'm just waiting for it. So while we're waiting for that, let's move on to the 1960s. So who ruled the 1960s?
Ooh, okay. Now we're going to have a shift in power on this one.
Oh yeah,
the 60s was all about Marvel.
The 60s was all about Marvel. I agree. Okay, and Eric was saying that Green Lantern was showcased 20 to 22. Oh, we were way off, Wes. We were way off. Okay, thanks for that, Eric. But yes, so the 1960s definitely goes to Marvel. And why don't you tell us why? Why does the 1960s belong to Marvel?
Even though Marvel existed prior, to me, that's like the starting point. That's what kickstarted Marvel into the stratosphere, because you had the introduction of the X-Men, you had Fantastic Four, you had Spider-Man. That was like the birth of Marvel right there. The 60s was definitely their time period. They had still had the introduction of the Justice League, which was huge popular, and they had the Teen Titans. Teen Titans were immensely popular in the 60s, but they just couldn't keep up, because then you had Marvel coming out with like Captain Marvel. You had the X-Men. It was X-Men 35 when two of their popular lines, the X-Men and Spider-Man, crossed and met for the first time. You had, X-Men 58, which was the introduction of Havoc. So, no, 60s, hands down, I give it to Marvel.
And I could not agree more. Marvel it's actually called unofficially the Marvel Age of Comics. I know Marvel Comics kind of made that up on their own, but it was just, I just cannot believe how much of a turnaround that happened for that company, because 1950s Marvel, they just kind of played more of like a follow the leader type of game in the 1950s. They're basically doing what other publishers were doing. They were just trying to stay relevant by copying what other publishers were doing. I know there is quite a fan base for the 1950s Marvel horror. And that's where you're getting like a lot of these books, like, Tales of Suspense, those types of books there, Journey into Mystery. They were trying to avoid, they were trying to avoid using anything with like horror or, something that was too offensive for the comics code at the time. But those books, I guess you could say light horror books that Marvel was doing at the time were the ones that gave us all of our favorite heroes later on in the 1960s, right? So I think that's amazing that how much.
someone mentioned earlier, about what our thoughts on the Human Torch and Submariner, and the '60s was also like the revival of the Submariner.
Yep.
And he had they relaunched his book, so it was like the '60s was hugely popular for Marvel.
For sure, absolutely. And this is the era now where we're seeing DC trying to play a little bit of catch up, right? Now DC definitely had success. I don't want to undermine DC's success in the 1960s. They definitely had quite a bit of success. They had the Batman TV show also, which raised the sales of Batman books for a bit. But I find that their success in the 1960s was it was a little artificial, because it was a lot like a roller coaster, right? Because they would get so successful and then it would drop. Like Batman sales, as soon as the Batman TV show ended, boom, right. Sales were right back down, right? It was done, right? So they really had a hard time staying relevant in the public in the pop cultural consciousness of the time, right? But Marvel had no issues with that at all, like they just killed it, right? Dan is asking, did the Human Torch predate the FF? Yes, he did.
He did.
The
Android version.
Yes, the Android. Yes, exactly. The versions. So Dan, just to answer your question a little bit better here, the Human Torch that appeared in the Golden Age was an android crime fighter. Was not Johnny Storm. They kind of revised the Human Torch. They basically took this character and threw him into the Fantastic Four and revised them a little bit, right? So and he made his first appearance in Marvel Comics #1. Very very famous cover from the Golden Age. So okay, and then Lowell Lucas Jr. is also asking, didn't Avengers debut with Thor? Not to mention big fights like Thing and Hulk. Yeah, actually, the Avengers did debut with Thor. He was on the cover of Avengers #1. So yeah. Okay, let us move on to the 1970s. Who is ruling the 1970s?
I'm still going to give it to Marvel.
Me too.
Marvel is on a roll at this point.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Marvel does rule it in the 1970s. Can you tell us why?
Because they kept on their train of originality. Because they introduced a lot of new heroes. Because you figure during the 70s they had introduced Luke Cage.
Yep.
This is number 17, which is his first solo book outside of Heroes for Hire. They introduced the Invaders, which we talked about earlier, which was the World War II heroes coming back. You had the original Human Torch, Submariner, Captain America, and Bucky. A lot of obscure characters. So they just the train just kept on going. Then you had, which I'm going to show if I could. Characters introduced like Moon Knight, who's getting his own show now, so he's immensely popular. So it was still, in my opinion, still belonged to Marvel, but we can't discredit DC.
Yeah, you definitely can't,
because DC had DC. Yeah, because they brought back Shazam.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Shazam #1 was one of the better selling books from the 1970s for sure. And I mean, you actually probably could still, just because it sold so well, you probably still could pick up that book for relatively cheap nowadays. I don't know how are the prices on that book right now.
Yeah, I've seen it fluctuate again depending upon condition. You can pick it up for about $100.
About $100 now. Wow, that's gone up for sure. And Eric Breen is saying Marvel ruled the 1970s with 4 words: giant size man. Yes, and I would agree. Actually, that I love Man Thing. Like that's a great title. Definitely love it. And the thing that's great about Marvel in the 1970s is you're right. They kind of continued with that originality. So, they have their original heroes, but now they're starting, because the comics code in the 1970s got really lax. So they start bringing all these new genres that were forgotten up until this point back into the limelight. So you have horror. Marvel horror is awesome. I love Marvel horror. So they start this line of horror books. They have their westerns. They have their sci-fi as well. Like they had just so many different books. Plus they had all of these stories that fit into this cohesive universe. So all their books kind of overlapped with each other, which I think was something that was really unheard of at this point. Do you have a favorite story from the 1970s at all?
Yes. I like I kind of like the Marvel premiere, the whole introduction of Iron Fist.
Yep.
Again, he wasn't like no one knew who Iron Fist was. He's like a BC character. But I loved him. I thought he was great. And then you also had the Defenders, which was a cool concept. Again, they took the whole Avengers idea and just threw some new heroes in the mix.
Yeah.
So that the Defenders, any new Defender story, I like.
Yeah,
then you had
I'm definitely a huge fan of the Defenders as well. Great team, really underrated. Because everyone thinks superhero teams. They think Justice League and the Avengers, but the Defenders they had some really great stuff in the 70s for sure.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of people are still having some issues here with. I don't know what's going on. I apologize. I don't know what's going on tonight. I don't know if there's some Illuminati crap going on or something. Somebody's trying to silence me, Wes. Someone's trying to silence me. But a lot of great moments in the 1970s. Like Wolverine fighting Hulk. Eric saying Tomb of Dracula. Oh, I would agree. Tomb of Dracula is another great book for sure.
And then you had Werewolf by Night. Can't forget that one.
Yep, can't forget Werewolf by Night. Great. That book too. I really like what they did with that, because when you think werewolves, you think horror book, right? But they really kind of blended that line between horror and superhero with that book really nicely, I feel. So and of course, we had Gwen Stacy that was killed off in the 1970s, right? Yeah, so that was big moments in the 1970s, as well as you said, Moon Knight in Werewolf by Night number 32, which is probably it's going to give, I think, Hulk 181 a run for its money, especially considering the show coming out, right? In terms of value, anyway, right? So.
Even though Marvel, we both agree Marvel definitely won. We got to give DC a little bit of love, because in the 70s, they reintroduced they brought back All-Star Comics 58, which was the introduction of Power Girl.
Yep.
They did, they introduced Black Lightning number 1. He was in the 70s.
Yep.
And then we talked about a lot of those obscure golden age heroes. Like in Justice League 107, they meet the Freedom Fighters, which have Doll Man, Uncle Sam, a lot of those Golden Age heroes. DC reintroduced in the 70s.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. So I mean, DC did have its moments in the 70s, for sure. And I think I think I'm really biased when it comes to Marvel in the 1970s. So I think I have to, venture out and check out some DC stuff from the 70s, for sure. Now, with Werewolf by Night 32, have you guys moved any copies of those in the store at all?
I haven't seen any.
You haven't seen any
Everyone's
yet.
holding on to them. Haven't seen any.
Okay. And do you know how much those are going for roughly right now?
You know what? Yeah, I checked. It's definitely in a 9.4 in a really good condition. It was up there like almost $200 last time I checked.
Okay. Yeah, so it's up there. It's up there.
It's starting
right?
to climb.
So, yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, and this Simonson's Manhunter in Detective 437 and 443, Rod. Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to a I guess you could call it a controversial era. No, I think we'll call it the pre-controversial era because there's a more controversial eras after that. But the 1980s, who rules the 1980s? This one's a tough one, actually.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Oh wow. I'm gonna have to give it to DC on this one. That's a tough one. That's a tough one.
You know what, Wes? I actually, yeah. You know what? I actually would have to agree with that. And the reason why is because something really significant happened in the 1980s. And yeah, so we have Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen that came out in 1986. And I guess you could make the argument that Marvel still was doing better than DC in the early 1980s. But I really think the early 1980s, you know, besides the Phoenix, the Phoenix stuff, I don't think Marvel really went wow, you know, in the early 1980s. But the thing that I think the main important thing that happened in the 1980s was this mass exodus of talent leaving Marvel to go to DC. So we're talking George Perez, we're talking John Byrne. They leave Marvel and they go to DC, and that was probably the best thing that could have happened to DC because you know, by the early 1980s, mid 1980s, a lot of their characters had become stale. I mean, like, you know, you have Batman. Batman was a stale character at this time. They actually were thinking of canceling him on many occasions before the mid 1980s. Superman, like, yeah, he had a great movie that got Superman some attention, but again, like, this was by that point, this was a character that had been around for almost 50 years. You know, there's only so much you can do with him. This talent leaves, goes to DC, and they basically make these characters relevant again for a new age, right? You know, and
you have George Perez doing one of my favorite books in the 80s, which was New Teen Titans.
Yep. Oh yeah, exactly. New Teen Titans, yeah, for sure. In terms of like issues like a comic book series that wasn't like a graphic novel from the era, New Teen Titans for sure was up there. Definitely cannot undermine Moore's Swamp Thing. Moore's Swamp Thing is like, he was just such a rock star back in the, you know, I know he's not considered like a rock star creator, but he just really was. The stuff he was doing with Swamp Thing was just like unbelievable. I absolutely love Moore's Swamp Thing. But I'm going to let you talk a little bit about Watchmen and Dark Knight. Why are they so significant?
Ooh, Dark Knight Returns. I think it's a super important book because it redefined Batman. Like you said earlier, Batman just got stale. That shook everybody. You know, I remember when it came out and read it for the first time, and I was blown away. And I said, to see Batman done in that way, and the storytelling was phenomenal. Definitely everybody looked at Batman totally different after that.
Correct. Absolutely. I think Batman, as we know him today, really started in the with Dark Knight Returns in the mid 1980s for sure. Because like, you know, I'm a huge Batman fan, and I tried in the you know, reading some of his stuff from the 70s. It's okay, you know what I mean? But I find like they were trying a little too hard to capture other things that were popular at the time and incorporated in Batman. So like not too long ago, I read, I don't have Batman 232, the first Ra's al Ghul, but I read it. I have a collected edition of Ra's al Ghul stories. And when I was reading that first appearance, I feel like they really were kind of making Batman like Roger Moore's James Bond. Like it just, that's what it reminded me of. You know, they had him on skis at one point. They had him, you know, like it's just, you know, if you took the cowl off, he would be almost like a James Bond character. And I think they really, like Frank Miller really made Batman what I think really what he was meant to be, right? So
I agree.
Yeah. How about Moore's Swamp Thing? Or sorry, I'm sorry, Watchmen. Moore's Watchmen.
Watchmen was another important book. You know what? I bought the issues when it came out in the 80s, and I never read them. I just had them, and they sat until like 10 years later. And I was like, everybody keeps talking about this Watchmen, and I was like, let me read this. And when I finally read it, I was like, wow, it was impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really like what he did with Watchmen for sure. And Eric is saying stream is glitching like crazy on his phone, but not on his laptop. Okay, so I know now it's not me because some people are having really clear stream and others are not for some reason. I'm telling you, Eric, it's the Illuminati. Like somebody's really trying to silence me this evening. I don't know why. But yeah, you know, like Watchmen was just it was just a book that was unlike anything we had seen up until that point. He was really kind of poking fun at the superhero genre as well, you know, because I mean, if you took these characters, like if these characters existed in real life, they would be messed up beyond all recognition because you really do have to have some psychological issues to want to do what they do, right? So, and Tom, thank you for agreeing with me. Yeah, that's a good point about 70s Batman, sometimes having a more as Bond sort of panache. Yeah, for sure. So we have really DC is ruling the 80s. Then you have Batman 1989, which came out, and you know, DC was in the spotlight now. They got all the attention, and now Marvel is 1986 is actually considered by many to be the worst year in the history of Marvel Comics. Like just the worst year for Marvel Comics. So many people have said this. So yeah. Now 1990s. Who rules the 1990s?
Oh, such a fun decade.
Yeah, it was. This is the controversial era that I think I wanted.
Oh man. Okay. Are we still going with the big two?
Yeah, this, you know what? You can say Image if you want. Go ahead.
It has to be Image.
Okay, we'll give it to Image.
It has to be Image. Because in the 1990s, you had that mad exodus, all those artists and writers, you know, wanting to own their own creations, and Image was just all over the place. I remember I fond memories of going to my local comic shop at the time and waiting for an Image book to come out. I mean, we kept hearing it was coming and hearing it was coming. You know, Spawn #1 got delayed until whenever. You know, we had Youngblood. It was like exciting. It was an exciting time. Granted, we got what we got, but it was at the time. It was exciting. So as far as the company ruling, I would go with Image. Plus, that was the decade of gimmicks and shiny.
Yes, absolutely. And hopefully now the Liefeld Legion will forgive me. You know, because we are giving Image some cred now, Liefeld Legion, because Adrian's saying that the Liefeld Legion is messing up the stream. But yeah, I know you're definitely right. I definitely think Image was a company that was a big player in the 90s. I mean, Todd McFarlane, if you ever listen to some interviews with him, like he was hiring some guys to work on just one book. They work on one book. and the royalties that they got from this one book was enough for them to like quit doing comic books. Like he said, these guys that were like, I don't know, 22 years old, they're getting off of one book, they made $200,000. So he's like, I couldn't get these guys to. He says I can't get these guys to come back because $200,000. They're 22 years old. They're off in the Bahamas. They're buying motorcycles, boats. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah. So Image was huge, definitely was. But like you said, we got what we got. The only book for me that I was able to stomach from that era is Spawn, really, because.
Yeah.
The other stuff was just not really well done, so.
Yeah, it was a new title every week. In the beginning it was exciting, but that's also the comic crash. Yep. People, I remember going to my local comic shop and people were buying 5, 6, 7 copies of Youngblood #1 and Supreme #1. And Nighthawk, and they're like, thinking that they were gonna retire.
Yes, yeah, exactly. There's a lot of greed, I think, on the part of consumers and publishers at the time, for sure. But like we said, I know both you and I, Wes, are a huge fan of the foil and the hologram cover and the holo covers for sure. I love them. I know some of them aren't really worth anything, but I love them. They look so cool. So for sure. Now
talking about the shiny, I was telling when we talked, I was the Venom.
Show us that.
We were talking about shiny, and when Venom Lethal Enforcer came out, the standard red cover, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll grab it. But then I saw that on the wall there was a gold version, and because it was shiny and it was different, I bought it and I sat on it. But then, this actually paid off because it's a rare. They didn't produce as many gold, so I wound up getting it graded. It came back at a 9.4. So I'm a little happy about that.
Absolutely. I think that's really cool because I actually didn't know that edition of that particular issue even existed. I was only aware of the red cover. I didn't even know about the gold one. So that's definitely a cool find for sure. Now, in terms of quality from the 1990s, because like I know you were very much immersed in the culture of comic books in the 1990s. Who do you think had the best quality books?
I would probably have to go with Marvel on as far as quality during that time period.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Marvel realized their mistakes and they started to turn things around. So I think the quality of the storytelling got a lot better because we had Marvel gave us the whole introduction of Venom. We had the first appearance of Carnage, which came out in the 90s. So yeah, I would definitely go with Marvel on that.
Marvel did have some good books in the that whole Carnage run was amazing. They really did. Like Jim Lee's X-Men was pretty good. I really enjoyed that. There were some great Marvel moments, but there also were like a lot of stinkers too for Marvel. I found too, like with the Clone Saga.
Can we say the Clone Saga?
Yeah, we got to say the Clone Saga, right? But I'm actually going to go back and reread that because I really want to see if it's as bad as people say it was. But I think DC had a lot of great stuff too in the 90s, like with the death of Superman. I don't know how you feel about that book, but that's one of my favorite Superman stories. Same thing with Nightfall from Batman. Just absolutely. Yeah, great Batman story. I feel like Batman stayed really consistently good from like the mid 1980s all the way through, even to present day. I don't any Batman book I read, I'm never really disappointed. So
the sad thing is about that whole Death of Superman run, people bought multiple copies. I'm guilty of that myself. I bought several runs, one to read and then a couple to put away. But working in the comic shop, we got people coming in. It's like, hey, I want to sell you my comics. I got the Death of Superman. All right, here's $1.
Yeah. There's the dollar. And but the thing is that book now on eBay, I've seen it. It's gone up a little bit, I think. But I mean, I actually prefer that book in trade format, to tell you the truth. But yeah, and a lot of people are weighing in here. Some people are saying Gemstone. Yeah, they did the single issue EC reprints. Actually, Gemstone for a while did the collected editions, the omnibus editions of the EC comics, and then yeah, Don Rosa Duck comics. Yeah, for sure. Then we have Lowell Lucas Jr. saying Sonic. Definitely, Sonic was a big one, and we also have Maximum Carnage. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
To go back to a comment, Dan made a comment about Hologram City. Here you go, Dan.
Yeah, I have that book actually. Yeah.
Is this look shiny enough for you?
My eyes.
But then on the DC front, in the 90s, DC gave us a character that no one expected to blow up until 30 years later. You figure that was like the whole introduction of Harley Quinn.
Right.
This is Mad Love, which gave us the origin of Harley. And then you had the Batman Adventures, number 12, which gave you her first appearance in print. So, yeah, I mean, the DC still was churning them out.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, let's go 2000. So from 2000 to 2010.
Whew. All right, this is a tough one.
And you're gonna have to help me out here because that's the era I know least about. Honestly, I don't know much. I was totally absent during that era.
Wow. Modern. I would. That's a tough one because they both started to turn things around. Batman was always Batman. Superman was always Superman. But then you had Spider-Man, and Venom was still hugely popular. So if I have to give it to anybody, I would have to give it to Marvel.
Okay.
I would have to give it to Marvel because you figured the Marvel from 2000 2010, you had the introduction of the MCU.
Yep.
So a lot of their books started to explode. Iron Man, who I always thought was like a B tier character, became an A tier character.
Yep.
So and their books started to reflect the movies, which I wasn't a fan of, but they were still immensely popular, and the writing was still on par. So I'm gonna have to give it to Marvel for that period.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, so let's give that one to Marvel, and I definitely want to address Eric's comment here. It says Marvel was good from 2005 to 2009, but DC was good for the entire decade. Slight advantage to DC. And the only reason why I think I would slightly agree with that is because one thing I know about the history of the era. So from 2000 to about 2004, 2005, this was the Joe Quesada, Bill Jemas era.
Yes.
And everyone, I know a lot of people say like this is one of the worst eras for Marvel. Bill Jemas was a jerk. Just some of the worst books ever were put out during this time. I know Marvel is considered, it was like a book that Bill Jemas did. It was considered one of the worst comics ever published. I don't know. Do you know Marvel? Do you know that book?
No, I don't know that book.
So check it out. It's Marvel, Marvill. Kind of meant to be like a Smallville type spoof.
Okay.
The Jemas Quesada era was just kind of, but yeah. So, Eric agrees with me. Jemas era was trash. Yeah. So, yeah. But I wanted to go up here. I know we're going a little over time here, but that's okay because I just wanted to get to present day here. Dan says, I feel like Batman ruled the 2010s. So that's a perfect segue. Who do you think rules from 2010 to 2020?
DC. I have to give it to DC.
I agree with you there.
With the Marvel highlights, but I have to give it to DC.
Yes, for sure. I'm actually I would agree with you with DC, and I'm specifically going to say Batman. Like Batman just annihilated every other book. Like Batman rules from like 2010 all the way through to like maybe 2016. Like the new 52 stuff that they had for Batman was just you couldn't touch it. It was just one great story after another. I think it started waning a little bit in quality with the DC Rebirth stuff. But yeah, nevertheless, I definitely would agree with you. DC rules the era. Now, we just started the 20s, right? So do you have any predictions for the next 10 years? So who do you think's on top right now? How are sales?
Now, it's DC.
DC,
it's
okay.
DC, just based on the sales in my store, it's still DC. Especially with the Joker war going on now, Batman books are flying out of here, and we order a decent amount. There's a lot of newcomers coming into the mix, jumping on. So yeah, it's going to be DC.
So still DC, huh? Yeah, because like I've been out of the new comic book game for a little bit, and on people's recommendations, I have been reading some recent stuff. So I have been reading Immortal Hulk, Venom. I'm going to check out Thor once the trade comes out. But I've heard a lot of good things about the Joker War. I've read Batman White Knight. I think that was Sean Murphy. That was pretty good. And also was it the Batman Who Laughs? That was pretty good too. I really enjoyed
Batman
that.
Who Laughs. It's usually popular. Marvel has, they have Miles Morales. That's the new hot word in Marvel right now is Miles Morales. So.
Okay, interesting. Actually, yeah, because his first appearance right now is, I think, one of the. I know we did a video actually on the channel not too long ago about how hot that book is right now. Yeah, so for sure, yeah, Miles Morales. Now he's supposed to make an MCU appearance soon, isn't he?
Well, I know they're doing that Spider-Verse Part 2, and then he's got the PS5 game coming out. It'd be nice if he shows up in the MCU.
Yeah,
but I know, so he's got those two things coming out. So it's all about Miles right now as far as Marvel.
For sure. So any predictions for the next 10 years? Who do you think's going to take it? It's hard to say because we don't really know, but
it's tough to say, but based on what I'm seeing, I think DC is gonna take it.
Yep. And so that basically brings us to who is the best company overall so far. And I think some people are going to be disappointed by this, but we have voted, and the fans also have voted. DC wins over Marvel. They got 5 points over Marvel's 3 points for best in each era. So DC was that first major company, and I think they definitely have stood the test of time and will continue to do so. But Marvel's not going anywhere. They do put out a lot of quality books, and I definitely am looking forward to seeing what they do next, for sure. What both companies are doing next. So for sure.
Agreed.
So any last thoughts at all?
No, it was great just talking about comics, man. I really enjoyed myself.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, and thank you for joining us this evening. I had a lot of fun, even though we had a little bit of some glitches here. I apologize for that, but I hope you all had a great time. Nevertheless, we definitely will be returning next week with another edition of the Friday Night Geek Show. Also, stay tuned for our new video that will be posted early next week. So it's Friday Geeks. Let's go out and have some fun. And I wish you all a great weekend, and we'll see you all back here next week. See you all in the next episode. Take care. Good night.